Welcome back to our channel. The moment Naomi stepped into the house, a chill ran along her spine as if the walls themselves were exhaling dread. Bill's body was sprawled unnaturally across the polished floor, one arm limp at his side, the other still curved around a small glass vial marked with a poison symbol so stark it seemed to glow in the dim light. For a heartbeat, the world fell entirely silent. Then everything inside her erupted at once. Shock, fear, anger, and something darker beneath them, a recognition she refused to name. Her knees buckled as she crouched beside him, but even as she reached for his pulse, another feeling coiled tightly inside her chest. The image of the bottle in his hand refused to leave her mind. The label, the scent, the unnatural stillness of his body, none of it aligned with the version of Bill she had built her life around. She tried to convince herself this was an accident, some terrible mistake, yet the thought rang hollow. Bill had always carried secrets in his pockets, folded neatly between charming smiles and careful choices. Naomi had learned to live with them, had talked herself into believing that love meant looking away. But now, staring at his lifeless form, the truth pressed itself into her heart with brutal clarity. Whatever this was, it didn't come out of nowhere. A storm of betrayal swelled within her as she dragged in a sharp breath. She thought of the late nights, the strange absences, the signs she had ignored. She thought of the arguments that circled endlessly without ever landing on the real issue. She thought of her own exhaustion, her compromises, the parts of herself she had slowly trimmed away to keep the peace. Now, kneeling beside him, she wasn't sure whether she felt devastation or confirmation. As if she had always sensed something was waiting to explode. The room around her seemed to shift as she searched for any clue, any explanation. A faint chemical smell lingered in the air, scraping at her throat. On the counter nearby lay a stack of scattered papers with Bill's handwriting looping across them, but she couldn't bring herself to reach for them yet. A dense, oppressive silence enveloped everything. Even the ticking clock sounded like it was holding its breath. A surge of rage flared through her when she realized that, if this was deliberate, he hadn't just abandoned her, he had chosen to leave her with the aftermath, the guilt, the questions. It twisted inside her like a bruise, throbbing with every heartbeat. She pressed her palm against the cold floor to steady herself, but the fury only grew sharper. How dare he leave her like this? How dare he make her responsible for piecing together the shattered fragments of whatever mess he had been hiding? The weight of the moment crushed her chest as confusion clashed with anger. She imagined 100 hypothetical scenarios, blackmail, threats, debts, betrayals, each more frantic than the last. The possibility that he had trusted someone else with something he hadn't trusted her with stung more than any physical wound. Had he confided in another person? Had someone manipulated him? Or had he simply chosen secrecy over transparency, even at the end? Her breath trembled, but she refused to let her emotions overwhelm her. She forced herself to look at his hand, still curled stubbornly around the vial. The grip was too tight for an accident. It suggested intent. Yet intent meant he had reached a breaking point without ever giving her the chance to help him. That realization ignited a raw bitterness that layered itself over her grief. Pulling herself together, Naomi rose shakily and scanned the room with new purpose. She noticed the subtle disturbances, a chair slightly askew, a faint scrape on the side of the table, a single broken glass on the floor near the kitchen entrance. The scene whispered of struggle, of hesitation, or perhaps intrusion. Her anger flickered into suspicion, and then suspicion deepened into a chilling certainty that she was standing at the edge of something much bigger than the moment before her. She moved through the house like a ghost, her senses sharpening with every step. Shadows clung to the corners, and the familiar setting felt alien, tainted. She found footprints near the back entrance, faint but undeniable, not Bill's size. Her pulse quickened, and she swallowed hard as a new narrative began to form in her mind. What if he hadn't chosen this? What if someone else had placed that vial in his hand, had orchestrated this scene? The thought sent a shiver racing down her spine, accompanied by a flash of protectiveness she didn't expect. Despite her rage, despite her hurt, she wasn't ready to believe Bill had simply given up. But even as she clung to that possibility, the fury inside her refused to fade. If someone had hurt him, why had he been vulnerable to them in the first place? What had he been hiding that opened the door to danger? And if he had trusted someone dangerous enough to push him to this moment, what did that say about the life they had built together? The internal conflict tore her apart. She wanted to grieve him, to cradle his body and beg the universe to rewind time. But she also wanted to scream, to shake him for withholding the truth, for forcing her into this nightmare without warning. Most of all, she wanted answers, answers she feared she would have to rip out of the world piece by relentless piece. The memory of their last conversation clawed at her. His eyes had carried something heavy that he tried to pretend wasn't there. She had felt dismissed, shut out, and she had swallowed her frustration to avoid a fight. Now that decision burned in her gut like acid. She wondered if she should have pushed him, demanded honesty, forced him to confront whatever was eating at him. Instead, she had chosen peace over truth, and now truth had found her anyway, in the worst possible way. With trembling fingers, Naomi searched Bill's pockets. She found a folded slip of paper, thin from being handled too many times. For a long moment, she simply stared at it, unable to unfold it. Her heart hammered violently as whispers of doubt slid through her thoughts. A confession? A final message? Evidence of someone else's influence? Her imagination raced, each possibility more agonizing than the last. She finally forced her hands to open the note. Inside was a single name, written in Bill's precise handwriting. A name she recognized, a name that made her vision narrow, a name tied to a history she had tried to bury. The bitterness that surged inside her made her stomach twist. So this was the person he had gone to in secret. This was the shadow lurking behind his recent distance. Betrayal rippled through her so violently that she felt sick. Her mind spun as fragmented memories pieced themselves together. Late-night calls he had declined to explain. Trips he insisted were routine. Paperwork he hid before she entered the room. Each moment stabbed at her, revealing a pattern she had been too willing to overlook. She clenched the paper tightly in her fist until it crumpled, the edges cutting into her palm as though punishing her for every time she had offered him blind trust. Her breath came in ragged waves as she returned to Bill's side, staring at his still face. The fury and the heartbreak collided inside her, creating a storm so intense she feared it would consume her. She knew she had to act, sitting in despair wouldn't bring answers. She needed to uncover what had happened, and she needed to confront the truth Bill had tried to take with him. The longer she stared at him, the more her resentment warred with her desperation. Part of her blamed him for everything she was about to endure. Another part, quieter but deeper, ached for him despite everything. That part whispered that she couldn't abandon him now, not when he needed her more than ever. Even in death, or in the twilight between life and death, he was pulling her into his chaos once again. Standing over him, she felt herself pulled in two opposing directions. One path led to anger, suspicion, and a thirst for justice so fierce it bordered on vengeance. The other, rooted in painful loyalty, pulled her toward the truth of who Bill was beneath all his failures, his secrets, his cowardice. She didn't know which part of herself would win, but she understood one thing with absolute clarity: this moment had destroyed any illusion of safety she once had. As she forced herself to pick up the vial, examining its weight and the residue inside, she made an unspoken vow, not to him, but to herself. She wouldn't let this end in silence. She wouldn't let whoever was involved escape untouched. And she wouldn't allow Bill's hidden life to dictate hers anymore. If she was going to be dragged into the shadows he had walked in, then she would walk with her eyes open, unflinching, and ready to confront whatever darkness awaited her. The air around her seemed to thicken with the first stirrings of a transformation she hadn't anticipated. Her grief hardened into resolve. Her confusion sharpened into purpose. The fragments of Naomi that had once loved gently and accepted quietly began to dissolve, replaced by a version of herself forged from pain and revelation, a version she barely recognized. She felt a shift inside her, like a door opening somewhere deep within. It frightened her and empowered her all at once. The innocence she had clung to was slipping through her fingers like sand, and in its place grew a determination as cold as the floor beneath her feet. Whatever this was. Suicide, murder, manipulation, betrayal, she would dismantle it piece by piece. And when she finally uncovered the truth, she would decide what to do with it, even if the decision shattered everything left standing. As she stood over Bill's unmoving body and looked down at the poison bottle that had changed the entire trajectory of her life, she felt an overwhelming certainty settle over her. This was only the beginning. The real threat had yet to show itself. The real betrayal still lingered in the shadows. And the real conflict, the one inside her, would only grow from here. With trembling hands, she gathered the note, the vial, and her resolve, preparing herself for the storm that awaited beyond the silent room. Whatever came next, whatever truth clawed its way into her life, she would face it without hesitation. There was no turning back now. She stepped away from Bill slowly, feeling the world tilt beneath her feet, and understood that the person she would be tomorrow depended entirely on the decisions she made in the next few hours. And as the weight of that truth pressed down on her, Naomi felt something inside her break, not with weakness, but with the terrifying strength of someone who had nothing left to lose.